Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to see you here. And I have the privilege of teaching apologetics in this very gymnasium 3 days a week. So greetings to seniors who I've already seen today. I'm excited about this particular topic. This topic was assigned to me, cultivating objective beauty. Now, I heard that Mr. Porras announced to his class that I would be addressing this topic. He said, Dr. Longshore is going to be addressing the topic of cultivating beauty because he is just so beautiful. He's remarkably handsome. That's what I was told. I was not present, but I appreciate Mr. Porras' ability to recognize beauty when he sees it. That's a good thing. So, I'm going to speak to you today and then give you a little time for Q&A. I've got some various headings that I'll work through. I'll signal those headings because I know you have a Worldview Assembly coming up. I thought we begin with the timeliness of this particular topic. So this kind of heading number one is the timeliness of talking about beauty, particularly your ability to cultivate objective beauty. Why is it timely? It's timely because we live in a time in which things are becoming remarkably ugly. You have probably seen the beautiful cathedrals of Europe, or cathedrals there in England, or cathedrals in our own land here in the United States of America. But you look at those and say, wow, I mean, can you imagine what would be involved in creating things that are that lovely, that are that striking? Now, we've come to a time of modernity in American society in which we have pop-up houses, we have apartment buildings that you look at them and they're objectively ugly. You listen to beautiful pieces by composers like Bach and Mozart, and now you are subjected to the likes of Taylor Swift, and you say, this is a hollow and vacuous time. You have seen in our own society how people's, even their own appearance and their dress has just become gaudy, it's become ugly, and yet we have this opportunity amidst this kind of ruins of Western civilization to present things to people that are objectively beautiful and show them, in the midst of a lot of ugliness, what it's like to actually live lives of holiness. You can see this once you get a little bit older, if you so choose to actually get on social media, which would be a terrible idea, but if you do it, you'll realize how many ugly things are said. People that can't even really frame lovely sentences anymore. They don't actually know how to speak or how to write. In the midst of this ugly landscape, we have an opportunity to present beautiful things. C.S. Lewis once said, if you decide to make thrills your regular diet and try to prolong them artificially, they will all get weaker and weaker and fewer, and you will be a bored, disillusioned old man for the rest of your life. We live in a time where people are living on thrills, but they're also coming to the end of those thrills. They're realizing the vanity of the things that they say they enjoy. And people are actually looking for substantial things that are going to be beautiful and powerful. One author I appreciate named Hilaire Belloc says, wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there's always laughter and good red wine. At least I've always found it so. Benedictamus Domino. Let us praise the Lord. The Catholic sun, this idea of wherever Christianity goes, what is there? Always laughter and good red wine. We want you to be formed into the kind of humans that are going to be able to enjoy God's created world, that will be able to actually laugh and make other people laugh, that will enjoy the good gifts God has given us, and to be able to distinguish good gifts from bad gifts and produce with what God has baked into creation to produce lovely things for people to enjoy. I think we also live in a time where people become remarkably bored. And so I wonder if you've ever experienced this. Say, I'm bored. Another author that I appreciate, R.J. Snell, said, boredom is a heresy, declaring God was wrong when he saw the goodness of the world. When you find yourself bored, it's like when you say, I don't like apples. In our household, if somebody says, I don't like apples, we say, well, God disagrees with you. You see, it's one thing to say, I don't like burnt biscuits. That means a human has actually taken creation and messed it up. You're free to not like burnt biscuits. But you are not free at all to dislike apples. They're straight from the hand of God, right from the tree. if you don't like apples or oranges or bananas for that matter, anything that is just the original creation itself, and it's your taste buds that are wrong. It's like saying, I don't like sunsets. Well, tough on you. God has made a world that is full of glory, and we don't have the right or the privilege to be bored in it. And yet many in our society have become bored of these things. So, it's a timely topic. But a second heading, it's timely to talk about cultivating objective beauty, but the second heading is to beware of beauty. Beware of beauty. Here I am talking to you about cultivating objective beauty, and Proverbs 31:30 says, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain. Now, somebody raise your hand, I'll call on you. Who can tell me what the word vain means? Over here? Useless and worthless. The text says beauty is vain. And I'm here to tell you how to cultivate objective beauty. What I'm here to do today is teach you how to cultivate worthlessness and uselessness. What is that about? I mean, is that not an actual, that's some pretty good exegesis here. The text says beauty is vain. We know that vanity means something is worthless, it is useless, and I'm here to tell you to cultivate that. Well, you have to start to wrestle with what you think that particular text means. Of course, the wise Solomon here is not talking about beauty qua beauty. He's not simply talking about beauty itself, because we have plenty of texts to tell us about the beauty of holiness. But he's talking about beauty detached from God and his ways. There is a way to have a kind of beauty that is actually hollowed out and empty. We hear about the same kind of beauty in Proverbs 5:3. We hear about the strange woman. It says, for the lips of a strange woman drop as an honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell. This strange woman, a woman who's a stranger to God and his ways, there's something appetizing about her. Her lips drip this honey. There's something beautiful even about this corrupt, godless woman. And that is what the wise Solomon is talking about when he says beauty is vain. Don't think that beauty in and of itself, as if you could detach it from God, it's still going to be present in some sense, but it's going to be hollow, it's going to be empty, it's going to lead you down to hell. We hear the same kind of thing happening in the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 16, and he gives us insight into how things developed in the way that they do when it becomes hollow and empty. You're going to hear the prophet talk about God giving Israel beauty, and then what Israel did with it. So this is Ezekiel 16, verse 12. And I put a jewel on thy forehead, and earrings in thine ears, and a beautiful crown upon thine head. Thus wast thou decked with gold and silver, and thy raiment was of fine linen and silk and embroidered work. Thou didst eat fine flour and honey and oil, and thou wast exceeding beautiful. And thou didst prosper into a kingdom, and thy renown went forth among the heathen. For thy beauty, for it was perfect, through my comeliness, which I had put upon thee, saith the Lord. But thou didst trust in thine own beauty, and played the harlot because of thy renown, and poured out thy fornications on everyone that passed by. His it was. God is telling them, I gave you all of these beautiful things, and you began to trust in your beauty, and in so doing, you prostituted your beauty to the foreign nations around you. And let me tell you how practical this is for you. Now, you live in a very beautiful place. Not only the inland Pacific Northwest, or the Palouse with those beautiful hills of grain, Moscow Mountain, all of that. You also live in a place that has become significantly more beautiful than most because of the Christendom that is here. You are in a classical Christian school for which many have worked remarkably hard. The work that has happened here is outstanding. And as a Bible verse that says, Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. Okay? You grew fat because of all of the good gifts that God gave you, and once you got fat, you kicked against God. You kicked against his ways. Same principle here in Ezekiel. God has actually made this a very beautiful place with beautiful families, with beautiful truth, beautiful Latin, beautiful music, beautiful drama that you get to enjoy. All of these things, it would be remarkably easy at this time to prostitute that beauty, to forget where it comes from, and to live off the labors of your fathers. So several of your fathers, grandfathers, your people have worked hard to cultivate beautiful things. But it's one thing to receive objective beauty from your parents and grandparents, and it's another thing for you to know how to actually produce it without trusting in it. Without trusting in it. Trusting in it is what Israel did, and in so doing, they lost it and handed it over. So that's that second heading, beware of beauty. Third is, but don't reject beauty entirely, because there is such a thing as objective beauty that we should both create and enjoy. We hear in Psalm 96, verse 8 and 9, give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name, bring an offering and come into his courts. O worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Fear before him all the earth. So whatever beauty the psalmist is talking about there in Psalm 96 is certainly not that beauty that is vain, that is worthless. There's a kind of beauty that's vain and worthless, and there's a kind that's not. Notice it's tied to the holiness of the Lord, this objective beauty that we're after. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. You're actually supposed to consider these things, be aware of these things. You have to objective beauty is set across this idea of subjective beauty. Subjective beauty is most simply characterized by the old phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Raise your hand if you like that phrase. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Look at you all. Pretty much all of you is just like hands down. Right? You're not raising. And that's good. I appreciate that. For those of you who did raise your hand, there's a place for this kind of idea. But objective beauty says, no, beauty's not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is in the object itself. Okay? If you are looking at one of the monstrosities that a modern artist has produced by walking into an actual museum and then taking duct tape and strapping a banana to the wall, which, yes, an artist actually did this. If you were to stand there and look at it and be like, it is beautiful, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's in me. I would look at you and tell you, there is no beauty here. That's a banana duct taped to a wall. Okay? And I don't actually care how you feel about it. If you think it's really lovely, then I'd like to talk to you about what you think loveliness is. But beauty is in the object itself, thus this objective beauty concept. We're not ultimately talking about you cultivating your ability to ascertain beauty. We're actually talking about your ability to produce beautiful things, okay? Objective things in the world that will be lovely. Robert Capon wrote a book called The Supper of the Lamb. And he talks about the beauty of the objective world, and we should appreciate the beauty of the objective world. This is what he wrote. Every time a man diagrams something instead of looking at it, every time he regards not what a thing is, but what it can be made to mean to him, every time he substitutes a conceit for a fact, he gets grease all over the kitchen of the world. Reality slips away from him, and he is left with nothing but the oldest monstrosity in the world, an idol. Things must be met for themselves. They must be met for themselves. So you appreciate a lovely meal for itself, not simply what it means to you. The beauty is found in the meal. So imagine you just had this lovely Thanksgiving meal. You probably have a lovely Christmas meal coming up. And mothers all over Moscow will be going around and getting all of these wonderful things, and Dad might smoke the ham or a turkey or something. And when that meal is placed there on the table, it is lovely. It's lovely. Even if you personally didn't get to partake of it, now that would, you want to partake of it. But even if you didn't, the beauty is objectively there in the meal itself. That's the idea. Now, next heading, I want to talk about spiritual and physical beauty. You live in a world that is both spiritual and physical. You must always be mindful of this. And the spiritual is not stripped entirely away from the physical. If you do that, and many people do that, if I were to strip all of the spirit out of the gymnasium stands at the moment, do you know what would happen to you? Well, your body would be dead. I am looking at spirits. I am looking at embodied spirits at the moment, and it is your spirit that's animating your body. Your spirit is animating your body. That is why when you die, your soul goes to be with the Lord and your body goes into the ground. Your body's going to fall flat when you die because it's your spirit that's actually animating your body. So it is with beauty. When we think of beauty, we naturally think of the physical. I've already talked to you about paintings and music and art and all of that, and that's true. But there is such a thing as spiritual beauty, and it too is objective. Objective spiritual beauty. It's either there or it's not. Okay? Now, as we could talk about the idea of strength, I could bring all of the seniors up here, senior males up here, and we could have a push-up contest. And we could scale them. We could figure out, we would know objectively which guy is the strongest, who could do the most push-ups. We could determine that kind of thing. Well, theoretically, we could do that with spiritual beauty in all of you as well, except there's no real way to test it. God, in His kindness to us, doesn't allow us to test it. He knows that we become remarkably prideful, or much more prideful than the senior males would about who's the strongest. If we could actually somehow ascertain this, but objectively, it is there. So think of it, like you might be lacking in that objective spiritual beauty that your brother or your sister actually has. And I would say, why is it that way? Why haven't you been cultivating that? Why don't you care about that? Don't you need to get to work at cultivating that particular objective beauty? Okay, so 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6 is the key text. 1 Peter 3, 1 through 6 says, "Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they also may, without the word, be won by the conversation of the wives, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear. Whose adorning, let it not be that outward adorning of plaiting the hair, and of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price." Notice that. The ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Now, if I had a scale up here, could we take your meek and quiet spirit, ladies, and place it on the scale, and, would it move? Well, no, unless you want to get into weird things about the nature of the spirit. Maybe it has a little weight, whatever. It's a spiritual reality. It's spirit. But the Bible calls it the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. Like, it's actually beautiful. It's an ornamentation of the heart. Now, I'll add here, the Apostle Peter is working against women that have started to care way too much about the way that they looked. Okay? Now, that's actually quite pertinent. Don't we live in a society where women care way too much about the way they look? Yes, this is kind of a perennial issue. But there's also the problem of women not caring at all what they look like on in their physical appearance. You don't want to do that either. What you want to see, what Peter's up to here is he's saying the inner beauty is going to express itself in external beauty. But the inner beauty is first. It is first, it is primary, it is foremost. You actually have to cultivate this. You cultivate this through confession of sin. You cultivate this through worship. You cultivate this through obedience to God's commands, right? You continue to do these kinds of things. You cultivate this primarily through faith, through trusting God. And as you do so, you're actually cultivating this virtue, which is objectively beautiful. All right, now with that said, I want to talk about the standards of beauty. This is your next heading, the standards of beauty. And now we're getting to the nitty-gritty of this talk. How can you determine what is beautiful and what is not beautiful? Once at New St. Andrews College, I had one of our fellows of music, who's remarkable on the cello, play a piece by Bach and a piece by Saint-Saëns. And I said, I want you to play both of these pieces, and they're lovely pieces. I said, I want you to play both of these pieces, and I want you to stand in front of everybody and tell us which one God likes more. Okay? There are objective standards of beauty by which you can ascertain if a thing is beautiful or if it's not. It's not subjective, it's objective, right? The joke in that is that we're little finite creatures with pea brains, and we can't actually ascertain that. We can't figure out sometimes. Now, if it's the decision between a banana duct taped to a wall and a piece by Monet, well, then we'll go Monet every time. We can make that judgment call. But often when we find two beautiful things, we can have our own opinion, but we need to be humble in our own opinion. Nevertheless, those standards exist, and I'm going to talk about those standards. I think I'm going to give you, is it 13? Yeah, here you go, 13. They're coming rapid fire, okay? The first standard of beauty is simply conformity to Scripture. If you're going to talk about the objective beauty of a thing, then you're going to have to use the authority of the Bible as your authority. This is we're going to be making our decisions based off of the authority of Scripture. Number two is historical durability. Has it stood the test of time? I referred to Taylor Swift earlier. Her songs have not stood the test of time. Right? Mozart's, Beethoven, they've stood the test of time, and therefore we're naturally going to lean on them more than we would those things that are modern. You don't have to despise things that are modern, but you have to acknowledge that historical durability is a standard of beauty. Number three is this balance of complexity and simplicity. A balance of complexity and simplicity. Now, you don't want just one or the other. Okay? If you were to go and just fall down on a piano and slap a bunch of keys, well, that would be complex. It wouldn't be lovely at all, right? Simplicity in and of itself, if you went down middle C and you just rang out middle C, you'd be like, I'm a simple kind of man. Well, you're also like a simpleton, okay? Simplicity by itself or complexity by itself isn't the key. It's this balance between complexity and simplicity. Fourth is dignity. Dignity. Is this particular object, whatever it might be, it could be you, it could be a community of people, it could be a song, it could be some kind of product that you have produced or an artifact you produced. Is it dignified? What do I mean by that? We are made in the image of God, and there is our dignity. Psalm 8, verse 4 and 5 says, What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. We live in a time where people are remarkably undignified, and we actually need to recover dignity without pride. Dignity without sass. And you need to understand that you're all being measured. Some of you are making A's, and some of you are making B's, and some of you are making C's, and some of you are making 9 out of 10 free throws, and others of you are making 3 out of 10 free throws. And newsflash, 9 out of 10 is better. A's are better. Dignity has this idea of honor. We bestow honor on that which is excellent, and you should be pursuing those kinds of things in the way that you comport yourself. Some of you comport yourselves in a more lovely way than others of you do. And you should all be aiming for that honorable and dignified life. Number 5 is metaphorical strength. Metaphorical strength. Does the particular object have this metaphorical strength? Metaphor is a very interesting idea. It's basically saying this thing is like this thing, but it's not exactly that thing. And it's rooted in, this is a very Christian way of thinking about the world. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Same thing, but then different. With and was. That's a very interesting idea. One of my favorite writers is P.G. Wodehouse. He is fantastic with metaphor. And there's something that's lovely and beautiful that comes through his writing. If you're going to talk about a strict disciplinarian, okay, a dad who is going to bring the rod to the rear end of a disobedient child, you could say, well, he can really spank, You can say that. Or in the language of Wodehouse, you could say, he awaited the receipt of 6 of the juiciest from a cane of the type that biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder, as the fellow said. That's a juicy cane for spanking. And so it just got better, didn't it? Or you could find a very stubborn old lady, and you could say, well, that's a stubborn old lady. Or you could say, in the words of Wodehouse, she continued to dig her toes in like Balaam's ass. Right? And you're like, oh, like this, I know. Immediately, you remember the story. You remember the angel. You remember the donkey and the donkey talking. And all of that comes through with the way that he writes. One of my favorite. Bertie is always getting in trouble because there's always some undesirable lady that wants to marry him, which is very funny. And he's always trying to escape her. And he writes, she had expressed in set terms her intention of lugging me to the altar rails and signaling the clergyman to do his stuff. Right? And he says, I want to get away from this particular woman. That's metaphor in writing, and it is very, very potent and tied into this idea of beauty. Number 6, harmony. Harmony. Harmony is a fascinating reality, isn't it? I mean, have you ever stepped back and thought about it? Harmony implies that you live in a world where there are more things than one. If you live in a world where there's only one thing, you can never have harmony. But you live in a world where there's all of these things, and you realize some of them pair quite well, and some of them don't pair as well. And you actually have this sometimes with a husband-wife duet combo, and their voices just blend really well. It's very interesting. And watch this. You just know this instinctively that certain things go together. You ready? Peanut butter and jelly. Meat and cheese. Broccoli and a little weak on broccoli and cheese. Okay, a little weak on broccoli and cheese. But yeah, macaroni with it, right? And now everyone's hungry. But have you thought about it? Like, seriously, why isn't it like peanut butter and broccoli? Like, why doesn't that work? It doesn't work, though. If you did a peanut butter and broccoli situation, you wouldn't be pleased. You see, because that's God has created a world with multiple things, and He tells you to go ahead and try some things out, test some things, see what happens. But understand that this is actually you're going to have to cultivate this ability to produce objective beauty with the materials that God has given you. Okay, number 7. Ability to work against standards while honoring and employing them. That's a very interesting concept. The ability to work against standards while honoring and employing them. One of the things we call you to do here, you probably got a sense, we always want you to be pushing the envelope. We always want you to be pushing the standard. But we want you to be doing it in a way that's actually honoring the standard and employing the standard. So if you're like, well, the standard is that I would walk in a straight line, but I'm going to run and bounce off the lockers. Well, okay, but you push the standard in such a way where you're not actually honoring the standard or employing the standard anymore. You understand? And this is where you don't always have to go peanut butter and jelly. Maybe somebody's going to go peanut butter and honey one time. See what happens. I know the standard is peanut butter and jelly, but I'm going to throw peanut butter and honey. I'm going to throw some bananas on my peanut butter and honey. And I'm going to see, and you might find out, hey, that's a nice combo, or you might find out that it's not. But this is why cultivating objective beauty actually requires you to go. It requires you to produce. It requires you to risk certain things. Now, some of you are natural risk takers. You're the kind of people that are probably going to be some kind of entrepreneur, where you have to pull the reins back on you when you're like juniors and seniors here. But there's others of you that are not going to have this quality natural to you. And my challenge to you, folks, is to actually cultivate it. Like, take some risks. Throw in a metaphor. You think, but I don't know if it's a good one. Well, throw it in anyway. Your teacher will tell you whether it's good or not. You actually have to test some of these things if you're going to be cultivating beauty. Number 8 is subtlety. Subtlety involves being delicate or nuanced or indirect. And reflect on your own character. Are you naturally more of like a middle linebacker? Not subtle. Okay, there's no subtlety there, right? Or are you more like some kind of ballet dancer? Right? What's your constitution? Be you male or female. Think about males and females can both lean one way or the other. Are you this blunt person that's always just going to say the thing and offend like 75% of the people in the room? And if that's you, there's a reason for blunt force kinds of men. Well, we need that. And a lady that can just shoot straight. That's great. But cultivate the art of subtlety. Can you be subtle? Do you know how to do that kind of thing? Jane Austen is remarkably well known for being subtle. In this famous line that opens up Pride and Prejudice, she says, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife." It's just rolls off the tongue and is really, really funny, but it's delicate. It's got a delicate touch to it. She's a subtle kind of person. JL actually combines subtlety with blunt force, which is what makes that such a great story. Like if JL would have just come out like Rambo style with a machine gun and just mowed down Cicero, that would also be a cool story, but it would be a different story. But the idea of, no, do come in. I have some milk. Would you like some milk and honey? Oh, yes, lay down right there. Subtlety through the temple. Just the beauty of that story is in the subtlety and in the bluntness. All right, number 9. Power to evoke love of truth and goodness. Does it have power to evoke love of truth and goodness? I encourage you to look this up when you get home. NSA just did a rendition of Elect of God, and they did it at one of the churches here. It's glorious, beautiful, the harmonies, the whole production just moves you to want to do what the commands are saying to you in the psalm, which is to forgive others. Number 10, acuity. A-C-U-I-T-Y, acuity. This is sharpness or keenness of perception, keenness of thought. Can you cut right to the chase? Can you determine the core issue on the table? Number 11 is craftsmanship. This is the skill and artistry involved in creating or making something. Do you actually pay attention to detail, to quality, and to technique? This would actually go even to your penmanship. Right? And I know I can already hear the sighs from you all about penmanship. But no, seriously, like, why write poorly? Like, why do that? Why is it cool for you to work really hard on your free throws, but then like your cursive? Like it's actually this physical kind of thing. Like, don't do anything in a sloppy manner. And you actually develop this ability of craftsmanship. Number 12, avoidance of formulistic cliches. You don't want to be cliche. Okay? Things like hit the nail on the head, or time flies when you're having fun, or bite the bullet. We've heard them 1,000 times. They're cliche. They're things that even common, normal people can kind of pick up on and say, and that's fine, but you actually want to avoid those kinds of things. On a side note, can you imagine the first guy that ever said, bite the bullet? I mean, that would have been amazing the first time you heard it. Like, I'm about to bite the bullet. But once it grows old and you're just using it, it's no longer impressive. Number 13, wisdom. And this is the final one. You must do it in the fear of the Lord. That is wisdom. I'm going to talk briefly about applications, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Let me give you some applications. When you think of, okay, these are the standards of beauty. There is objective beauty that I should be aware of, but I really should produce these objective things. Where should I start? And I want to say it's an all-encompassing kind of thing. When you think of beauty, you think, well, if I'm not a painter, then I won't create beautiful things. No, there's all sorts of ways you can do it. Number 1, do it in your writing. Actually, make your writing beautiful. Make it lovely. Give it this art of subtlety. Give it harmony. Give it metaphor. Do it in speaking. Think about the way, the words that come out of your mouth. Make them, cultivate the ability to make other people laugh in a wholesome way. Can you actually do that? Particularly like young guys here, all right? When you're young, it's mostly dumb jokes. I get it. And it's like dumb jokes and then your buddy laughs. That's fine. Throw in a dumb joke every now and then. But can you actually do something that sparkles a bit? Can you do something that elevates? Can you be funny in a way that everybody knows, hey, that wasn't just funny to the 7th graders. That would have been funny to dad and mom. Can you cultivate that kind of way in your speaking? Number 3, in cooking. Men, learn to smoke meat. Right? And when you smoke the meat, make it good. Make it right. Cultivate those kind of lovely things. Ladies, all sorts of cooking. Number 4, in your conversation. Think about the conversation itself. I don't know if you've ever been around like two guys that are both strong intellects, that are both good men. But you actually find their conversation engaging, uplifting, insightful. You're interested. Like, people will pay money to watch them talk to each other. Okay, well, you might not be on that level yet, but if we were to record your conversations with your friends, are they beautiful or are they stupid? If they're stupid and they're degrading and they're low, well, you know, you're being a loser. You're not working on cultivating objective beauty. And this actually takes courage and pride, because you're going to be in some conversations that you know, hey, this is a stupid conversation and I'm going to leave. And then when you do, like, people go, oh, you're too righteous for us. And there'll be all kinds of stuff they're going to say about you. But actually elevate it. Elevate, you have practice every day in cultivating beautiful conversation. Number 5, singing and music. Sing well, learn harmonies. Number 6, in your manners. Think about the way your dinner table operates. Do you eat like some kind of grump, some kind of Mr. Glop situation? Or do you actually know how to sit down at the table, to have a meal, to not interrupt other people when they're speaking, to actually listen, to enjoy the meal, and to comport yourself in a way that you could actually go to a dinner and not embarrass yourself? And then you actually have to train yourself in those particular manners. Do you know about bringing gifts to people on certain occasions, opening doors for the ladies, all of that kind of stuff? Number 7, humor. I already kind of indicated this before, but there's something beautiful in humor, particularly in elevated humor. Number 8, in your appearance, in the way that you dress yourself, in the way that you walk around and comport yourself. Think about makeup. It's very interesting. Whether you do the makeup thing or the not makeup thing, we obviously know what the gaudy makeup thing does, right? It actually, rather than accentuating the beauty of a woman's face, we've turned her into a clown. Everything's exaggerated. One of my favorite lines from Pastor Wilson was that the lady shouldn't be walking around with enough eyeshadow that they look like a sultry raccoon. That's hilarious. And it's another great metaphor. You don't want to do that. It's actually signaling to people that you're not in step with beauty, right? You're basically trying to over-exaggerate it. It's actually signaling that you're caring way too much about it, and it's just sending the signal to the whole world that that's what's going on. But learning how to do it appropriately and in a fitting way, hey, that's great. And number 9, group relations. Make this school a beautiful place. Make it a wonderful assembly. And you're going to have to use wisdom to do this. It actually requires leadership. It requires knowing what's ugly about your community, knowing the sins of your community, knowing the temptations that face your particular grade level, knowing that if you interact with that teacher's that way, that teacher's the other way. But how do you actually cultivate, whether it's a sports team or a particular class, where you're mindful of what's ugly in your community and what needs to be beautified in your community, and you can actually do this. My final encouragement to you before questions is that most people don't grow to cultivate objective beauty because they never start. They're cowards. They're afraid. You are not going to make, none of the objective beauty that you attempt to cultivate in the next 2 weeks is going to be your magnum opus. It's just not, because you're 18 or 17 or 16 or 15. But you have to get started. The only way you're going to get better is by starting. So when you see an opportunity, take it, cultivate that objective beauty. All right, with that, we have only about 5 minutes for questions. Raise them, I'll call on you. Back. Oh, we do that all the time. Like when you smoke a guy on the football field, and you're like, when you do that kind of thing. So we love, mainly sports, the place where we do something that is actually full of craftsmanship, full of glory and honor, and immediately we're like, hey, give it to me, that kind of thing.
So towards the beginning of your talk, you mentioned how like apples were created by God and therefore they're beautiful. But then later, the banana, that was ugly. So how do you harmonize those two things?
The banana is lovely. The banana is glorious. But some fool thinking that he can take duct tape, strap it to a wall, and claim that he's actually done something artistic, that's what's ugly. It's not the banana, it's his pretended craftsmanship. Subley. I think. Somebody in the back? Any other questions?
How do you organize tastes when it comes to art as opposed to beauty? Like, can something be tasteful to someone else but not necessarily beautiful and the other way around?
Yeah, I do think there's a place for like tastes. Okay, it's pretty clear. Like I'm 6'2", and I'm like a steak and mashed potatoes guy. You know what I mean? That's like my taste. So there's going to be this is going to happen on all sorts of fronts. What kind of sports you like, what sorts of music you like. So don't be persnickety in your beauty thing. Like if you just look down on anybody that doesn't like Rembrandt, you're like Rembrandt's the best. It just gets weird. So there's definitely a place for taste because of the particularity, because God's made a lot of people. There's all kinds of diversity in the world He created. Good questions. Any others? Back? Ooh, like when it's real objective beauty? I mean, you really do. This is the weird thing. I mean, you have the burden of many of you having grown up here. It's a standout place. Like people, if you come fresh, people come fresh and they're like, whoa, it hits them like boom. It's like opening up an oven that's been riding at 400 for a few hours. Just woof. But you can actually be kind of numb to it when you're present. It absolutely stands out. And that is actually the sign that God's hand of blessing is on it. Remember, the beauty comes from Him. You became beauty through my comeliness that I placed upon you. I gave you the jewels. And so this is intimately related to the growth and expansion of the kingdom of God. And we need to ask God for the humility that beauty would continue to percolate, that we continue to produce beautiful things.
Can you tell if music has beauty?
How can you tell? I would use these same kinds of standards. I think you could develop other kinds of standards. But you would say, like, well, is there subtlety in it? Is there complexity in it? And is there simplicity in it? Right? Those kinds of measurements that we walk through with the standards of beauty, those are the ones that I'd be using to measure any piece of work, any objective beauty, including music. Any other questions? Last one.
If all beauty is objective, then would there be an objectively best like ice cream flavor or best color?
No doubt.
Best color?
No doubt. I say no doubt. Well, I don't know about color. That makes it a little interesting. I don't know if it works with color. Because color's wild. Start thinking about color, you go nuts. But when it comes to, here's my particular analysis of this. And maybe there's a tie at the top. I don't know. There could be a tie. There could be a tie between both of these. But there is a standard of beauty. But in our finitude, we can't even pretend to actually know what it is. Okay, so this is where humility comes in. So when I joke about which one does God like best, I think you can do the same thing with ice cream. Like which one does God like best? Which is the premier ice cream? But one, we could never know. Two, I don't know if it's like there's a tie or if he's got 7 that he likes the best. But that idea of objective beauty stands. All right, God bless.